Yusuf, sleeping nearby, stirs. Nightmare? Yeah. What about? Ibrahim wants to say, about becoming what I escaped, about spending 27 years serving the thing that destroyed me, about standing in my own village and not even recognizing it. But instead he says, nothing, just blood, the usual. Yusuf nods, returns to sleep. Ibrahim lies awake until dawn. The collection in the first village goes smoothly, 20 boys between 8 and 15. The usual scenes, mothers crying, fathers silent, children confused. Ibrahim maintains his professional distance, gives orders, supervises the examination, makes marks in the ledger. He's done this so many times that the emotions don't touch him anymore, or he tells himself they don't. But today, watching a mother clutch her son, Ibrahim feels something crack inside him, just slightly, just enough to let a sliver of memory through. He remembers clutching someone, being held, warmth, safety, the sensation without the details, and then it's gone. They move to the second village, then the third. By the fourth village, Ibrahim's unease has grown into something sharper, recognition. This place, he's been here before. He knows he has. But when? The memories won't come into focus. Just fragments. A church with a specific bell tower. A well in the center of the square. A house on a hillside. Wait. That house. He knows that house. Ibrahim stops walking, stares at a small dwelling on the edge of the village. Stone walls, thatched roof. Nothing special. Thousands of houses in the empire look exactly like it. But this one. Yusuf notices him staring. What is it? That house. Do we have records of who lives there? Yusuf checks the ledger. Family of 4. Father's dead. Mother, 2 sons 14 and 9, and a daughter 7. Why? Ibrahim doesn't answer. Can't answer. Because he's remembering. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. That house. He lived in that house. Or someone who looked like him lived there. A boy who's been dead for 32 years but whose memories are suddenly surfacing like bodies rising from a lake. His mother lived in that house. His. He can't remember her name, can't remember her face, but he remembers the house, the smell of bread, the sound of her voice, though not the words. The sensation of being small and held and safe. And then the soldiers came. Soldiers like him, wearing the same uniform he's wearing now, speaking the same language he speaks now, serving the same sultan he serves now. Ibrahim realizes with absolute certainty, this is his village. He's standing in the place he was stolen from, and he's here to steal more children. The irony is so perfect it feels like divine punishment, like God, whichever God, Christian or Muslim, has arranged this moment specifically to break him, to force him to see what he's become. We need to examine the boys, Yusuf says, oblivious to Ibrahim's internal collapse. The mother's bringing them now. A woman approaches. She's in her 50s, worn by labor and grief. She has 2 sons with her. The older one, 14, looks defiant. The younger, 9, looks terrified. The woman's eyes are resigned. She's been through this before. Everyone in this village has. They know the routine. Fighting is pointless. Ibrahim looks at her face, searches for recognition. Is she someone he knew? An aunt? A neighbor? A friend of his mother? He has no idea. The details are gone. All that remains is the shape of the memory, the ghost of a life. The examination proceeds mechanically. The 14-year-old is too old, past prime collection age. He's marked as exempt. The 9-year-old passes all the tests. Healthy, intelligent, exactly what the Empire wants. He's marked for collection. The mother doesn't scream. She's too exhausted for screaming. She just nods, accepts it, releases her son's hand. And the boy, confused and frightened, joins the line of other boys in the village square. Ibrahim watches this happen, does nothing to stop it. Because what would he do? Release this one boy? That would just mean collecting a different boy from a different house. The quota must be met. The system doesn't care which boys, just that there are enough of them. But later, when the column is preparing to leave, Ibrahim finds himself walking toward that house, the one he remembers. He doesn't know why, maybe to see if anything inside triggers more memory. Maybe to confirm that it's really his village. Maybe just to feel something other than the stone. The door is open. He enters without announcing himself. Inside, it's dark and sparse. A single room, straw mattresses in the corner, a fireplace, a wooden table. On a shelf, a small icon of the Virgin Mary, partially hidden behind a cloth, keeping the Christian faith barely alive in a house that's supposed to be Muslim now. Ibrahim stares at the icon, and suddenly, with absolute clarity, he remembers. His mother used to pray to an icon exactly like this, every morning, in Serbian, words he no longer knows, prayers he can't recall. But the image, that particular style, that specific expression on Mary's face he remembers. She prayed to this, and then men came and took him away, and he never saw her or that icon again. Until now. He reaches out, touches the icon. His hand is shaking. The stone in his chest is crushing him. He wants to scream, wants to cry, wants to burn this village to the ground or burn himself. Wants to do something, anything, that acknowledges what's happening. But he doesn't. He just stands there, touching a religious image he's not supposed to recognize, feeling the weight of 32 years of service, of theft, of becoming exactly what destroyed him. Behind him, someone speaks. Startled, he turns. It's an old woman, not the mother whose son he just took. Someone else. She's maybe 70, bent with age, eyes sharp despite the wrinkles. She speaks in Serbian, slowly, carefully. You're one of them, the stolen ones. I can see it in your face. Ibrahim responds automatically in Turkish. I don't speak Serbian. But he does. He understood every word. And she knows he understood, because something in his expression gave him away. She continues in Serbian. Your mother. There was a woman in this village. Lost her son 30-some years ago. She prayed for him every day until she died. Believed he was still alive somewhere. Believed he'd come home. The old woman pauses. She died 10 years ago. Never stopped waiting. Ibrahim feels his throat closing. Wants to ask, what was her name? What did she look like? Was I hers? But the words won't come. And even if they did, what would be the point? If this was his mother, if she waited for him, if she died still believing, what does that change? He's still Ibrahim, still a janissary, still the weapon that just took another woman's son. The old woman sees his expression, shakes her head. They take boys, turn them into Turks, send them back to take more boys. The snake eating its tail. She knew that's what they'd done to her son. Prayed he'd forgotten. Prayed the forgetting was complete. Because remembering, she gestures at Ibrahim's face, at the obvious pain there. Remembering is worse. Ibrahim turns, walks out of the house, doesn't look back, rejoins his unit, gives orders to march, and they leave the village behind. That night, camped under stars, Ibrahim sits apart from his men. Yusuf tries to engage him in conversation. Ibrahim doesn't respond, just stares into the fire, feeling the stone in his chest grow heavier than it's ever been. He understands now, fully, completely. He was that boy, his mother was that woman, and he just returned to his birthplace as the thing that destroyed him. The cycle is perfect, elegant, devastating. He's the snake eating its tail, the weapon pointed at itself, the theft perpetuating itself through stolen people. And there's nothing he can do about it. Because even knowing this, even understanding exactly what he is and how he became it, he'll still serve. He'll still collect boys. He'll still march when ordered, and kill when commanded, and sleep in comfortable quarters, and accept his salary, because that's all he knows how to do. That's all he is. The next morning, they move to the next village. The collections continue. Ibrahim performs his duties with mechanical precision, but something has broken inside him, or maybe something has finally healed. He's not sure which. All he knows is that the numbness is gone. The stone remains, but now he feels its full weight. No more pretending it's not there. No more convincing himself that his service is just work, that the boys he takes are just statistics, that the system is something separate from himself. He is the system. He's the weapon, fully formed. And standing in his own village, taking boys from houses like the one he was taken from, he's become the perfect embodiment of everything the Devshirme system creates. A man who knows exactly what was stolen from him and steals it from others anyway. Over the next weeks, as they complete the collection tour, Ibrahim watches his men interact with the boys they've collected. 50 children now, bound and marching toward Istanbul, some crying, some silent, some already learning to survive by adapting, and he sees himself in every one of them, not as he is now, but as he was, before the transformation, before the breaking, before Ibrahim. One boy in particular catches his attention. 9 years old, Serbian, collected from that village, the village that might be Ibrahim's birthplace. The boy has sharp eyes, intelligence, the kind of alertness that marks him as high potential. He'll be sorted into janissary training. He'll receive the same education Ibrahim received, the same conditioning, the same systematic erasure of identity. And in 30 years, he'll stand in some village square and watch boys being collected and feel a stone form in his chest. And he'll serve anyway, because that's what the system creates. Not just obedient soldiers, but men who know they're slaves and serve anyway. Men who remember they were stolen and steal anyway. Men who carry the weight of their own erasure and teach others to carry it too. The weapon doesn't just perpetuate itself, it teaches itself to perpetuate. That's the final stage of the transformation. Not forgetting, but remembering and serving anyway. Remembering and perpetuating anyway. Remembering and accepting that this is who you are now, who you'll always be, who your victims will become. Ibrahim looks at that 9-year-old boy and thinks, I should tell him, should warn him, should say something that makes this bearable, or meaningful, or at least acknowledged. But what would he say? In 30 years, you'll stand where I'm standing and feel what I'm feeling and serve anyway. What comfort is that? What good does that knowledge do? So he says nothing, just watches the boy march, watches him learn to survive, watches the beginnings of the transformation that will turn him into another Ibrahim, another weapon, another man with a stone in his chest. They reach Istanbul 6 weeks later. The boys are processed, examined, sorted. The 9-year-old from Ibrahim's village is marked for janissary training. High potential, smart, alert. Exactly what the empire needs. Ibrahim watches him disappear into the training barracks. The same barracks Ibrahim entered 32 years ago, and he realizes the cycle is unbreakable. Not because the boys can't escape, but because there's nowhere to escape to. The past is gone. The future is the empire. And the present is just the space between what you were and what you'll become. That night, Ibrahim returns to his quarters, sits alone, and for the first time in 27 years of service, he allows himself to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. Tears running down his face while he sits perfectly still, staring at nothing. He cries for the boy he was, for the mother who waited until she died, for the 9-year-old who'll become him, for the system that works so perfectly that even knowing you're trapped doesn't set you free, for the stone that will never get lighter, for the 32 years of service he's already given and the however many more he'll give until he dies, for the fact that understanding your own destruction doesn't stop you from perpetuating it. He cries until there's nothing left. Then he washes his face, says his evening prayers in Arabic, goes to sleep. And in the morning, when his commander asks if he's ready for the next assignment, Ibrahim says yes, because that's what weapons do. They serve, even when they know they're weapons, even when they understand what they cost, even when they've stood in their own village and taken their own people's children. They serve, because the alternative is unthinkable, and the empire has made sure that everything except service is unthinkable. The stone gets heavier, the cracks in the system get deeper, and Ibrahim continues marching toward whatever comes next, not because he wants to, not because he believes in it, but because he's the weapon, and weapons don't get to choose. But somewhere, in barracks across the empire, other janissaries are having similar moments, similar recognitions, similar stones forming in their chests. And those stones, collectively, are starting to weigh down the entire system, making it slower, less effective, more prone to malfunction. The weapon is starting to break, not from external pressure, from internal weight, from the accumulated trauma of 10,000 men who know they're slaves and serve anyway, who remember they were stolen and steal anyway, who carry stones in their chests until the weight becomes unbearable. Something is going to crack, soon, and when it does, 200 years of accumulated grief will come pouring out. But not yet, not today. Today, Ibrahim serves, and the empire continues, and the boys march toward their transformation, and the cycle perpetuates itself one more time. Because that's what systems do. They run until they can't. And this one isn't finished yet. Section 7. The end of the harvest. Jump forward. 56 years. The year is 1826. Ibrahim is 96 years old, impossibly old for the era, though not unprecedented among janissaries who've lived lives of relative comfort and medical care. He's survived longer than he ever expected, longer than he wanted, if he's honest with himself. He no longer serves actively. His last campaign was 20 years ago, his last collection duty 30 years before that. Now he lives in a small room near the old barracks, receiving a pension from the empire he spent 70 years serving. He's become what the Ottomans call an elder brother, a retired janissary who advises younger recruits, who carries institutional memory, who represents the system's continuity. But the system is dying. Everyone knows it. Even Ibrahim, who's watched it from the inside for nearly a century, can feel the structure collapsing. The janissaries aren't what they once were, haven't been for decades. They've become corrupt, entitled, more interested in political power than military effectiveness. They overthrow sultans who displease them, riot when their pay is delayed, demand privileges that undermine the entire purpose of their existence. The men who are supposed to have no loyalties, except to the sultan, now have nothing but self-interest. And the worst part, the part that breaks Ibrahim's heart, in a way he can't fully articulate, is that they're right to demand more, because the empire broke its promises first. The Sultan started allowing janissaries to marry in the 1600s, officially prohibited, but widely tolerated. Started letting them pass wealth to sons. Started recruiting Turkish Muslim boys instead of Christian Devshirme boys. Started treating them as just another military unit instead of the sacred brotherhood they were designed to be. The empire wanted the loyalty without the cost, wanted the weapon without the maintenance, and slowly, over centuries, the weapon degraded, became unreliable, became dangerous. Ibrahim sits in a tea house near his room, a place where old janissaries gather to drink and complain and remember better days. Most of them are in their 60s or 70s, ancient by Ottoman standards. He's the oldest by far, the last living connection to the early days of the system, the last man who remembers when Devshirme meant something pure and terrible and absolute. A younger janissary, maybe 35, approaches his table. "You're Ibrahim R., the one who served under Selim II?" Ibrahim nods slowly. Names from 70 years ago, sultans long dead, campaigns that have faded into legend. They say you were collected before 1450, that you're the oldest janissary alive. I don't know. Maybe. The young man sits without asking permission. He has the arrogance of the new generation. "Tell me, was it really better then? The old system? The way the elders talk about it?" Ibrahim stares at him. This boy, no. This man has no idea. He was recruited from a Turkish family, speaks only Turkish, has never known the breaking, never felt the stone form in his chest. He's just a soldier who happens to wear a red cap. He has no concept of what the janissaries were supposed to be. "It wasn't better," Ibrahim says quietly. "It was just clearer. We knew what we were, what we cost, what we'd become. Now," he gestures vaguely at the city beyond the tea house walls. "Now, no one knows anything." The young man looks disappointed, like he expected war stories or tactical wisdom. He finishes his tea and leaves. Ibrahim remains, watching the steam rise from his cup, feeling the stone in his chest that's become almost comfortable over the decades, like an old injury that aches but reminds you you're still alive. That evening, walking back to his room, Ibrahim hears rumors, whispers in the streets. The new Sultan, Mahmud II, is planning something, a reform, a modernization of the military. And the janissaries, the once invincible elite, are the obstacle. They resist every change, cling to old privileges, threaten violence when anyone suggests reform. Something is coming. Ibrahim can feel it. After 70 years in the military, you develop instincts about when violence is about to erupt. The air changes. People move differently. Officers have meetings behind closed doors. Orders are issued quietly. He's seen this before. The build-up to a purge. But he's too old to run, too tired to care. If the empire wants to destroy what it created, that's almost poetic. The weapon finally turning on itself completely. 3 days later, it happens. June 15th, 1826. A date that will be called the Vaka-i Hayriye, the auspicious incident in Ottoman records. But there's nothing auspicious about it. It's a massacre. The Sultan orders the janissaries to adopt new European-style military training. They refuse. They riot, as they've done dozens of times before. But this time, the Sultan doesn't back down. This time, he's prepared. Artillery, cannons, positioned around the janissary barracks and the Et Maidani square, where the janissaries have gathered to demonstrate their power. The Sultan's new troops, loyal, reform-minded, not tainted by janissary culture, surround the area. And then, at the Sultan's order, they open fire. Ibrahim hears the first cannon blast from his room a mile away. The sound is unmistakable. He's heard it hundreds of times in his life, but never like this, never directed at janissaries, never used against the Sultan's own men. He walks toward the sound, slowly, because his legs don't work like they used to. By the time he reaches the edge of the conflict zone, the slaughter is well underway. The Et Maidani square is burning, the barracks are burning, janissaries are running through the streets, some armed, some not, all hunted. The Sultan's new troops show no mercy. They've been given orders: eliminate the janissary corps entirely, kill the resistors, imprison the rest, dismantle the institution that's lasted for over 400 years. Ibrahim watches from a distance, too old to fight, too aware to run. He just stands there, leaning against a wall, watching the empire destroy what it spent centuries building. A group of janissaries runs past him, young men, terrified, bleeding. One of them recognizes him. "Elder brother, they're killing everyone. We have to." A volley of musket fire cuts him off. All 5 janissaries fall. The Sultan's soldiers reload methodically, fire again at anyone still moving. then continue their sweep through the streets. Ibrahim doesn't move, doesn't hide. A soldier approaches him, musket raised, sees his age, his empty hands, the way he's just standing there, calm, waiting. "You're one of them," the soldier says. A statement, not a question. "I was. We have orders to—" "I know what your orders are." Ibrahim's voice is steady. "But look at me. I'm 96 years old. I can barely walk. I'm not a threat. I'm just a ghost." The soldier stares at him, sees something in Ibrahim's face. Resignation, maybe. Or relief. Or just exhaustion so deep it's indistinguishable from peace. He lowers his musket. "Get out of here. Go back. To wherever you live. If you're found in the streets tomorrow, you'll be killed with the rest." Ibrahim nods, turns, walks away slowly. Behind him, the killing continues. Screams, gunfire, the sound of an institution dying violently. By morning, 6,000 janissaries are dead, the barracks are ruins, the survivors are being hunted across the city, and the Sultan issues a decree. The Janissary Corps is abolished. The institution is dismantled. The very word janissary is banned from official documents. 450 years, from 1,380 to 1,826, the longest-running military institution of its kind in history, and it ends in a single night of fire and blood and massacre. Ibrahim survives. Barely. He hides in his room while the purges continue for weeks. Former janissaries are rounded up, imprisoned, exiled, executed. The empire is purging itself of the weapon it created, destroying every trace, erasing the institution from official memory. The irony isn't lost on Ibrahim. The janissaries, who were created through systematic erasure of identity, are now being systematically erased themselves. The weapon has been destroyed by its maker. The cycle is complete. In the months after the massacre, Ibrahim receives no pension. The empire has declared that janissaries never existed, that the old military system was a mistake, that the new Ottoman army will be modern, European style, built on entirely different principles. The boys who were stolen, converted, transformed officially, they never were. Ibrahim lives on charity, food from former comrades who escaped the purge, shelter from people who remember when janissaries were respected, money from sons of janissaries, the ones born of illegal marriages, who technically shouldn't exist but do anyway. He's too old to work, too broken to beg. He just exists in a city that's trying to forget he was ever there. One day, an old man visits him, a former janissary, maybe 70, who escaped the purge by fleeing to a small village. He brings bread and cheese. They eat together in silence. Finally, the man speaks. "Do you remember your name? Your real name?" Ibrahim stares at him. In 70 years of service, no one has asked him that question. It's been forbidden to even think about. And now, in the ruins of the system, someone dares to ask. "No," Ibrahim says. "I don't remember." The man nods, quiet for a moment. Then, "I do. I remember mine. Kept it hidden my whole life. Never spoke it. Never wrote it. But I remembered. And now that the janissaries are gone, now that I'm free," he pauses. "I don't know what to do with it. It's just a word, attached to a boy who died 70 years ago. What good is it now?" Ibrahim understands perfectly. The name wouldn't bring anything back, wouldn't undo the transformation, wouldn't return the stolen years. It would just be a ghost, a reminder of what was lost. "We were supposed to be weapons," Ibrahim says quietly. "Perfect weapons. No family, no loyalty except to the Sultan, no identity except what the empire gave us. And it worked. God, it worked. For centuries. Until the weapon got too powerful. Until we started to believe we were more than weapons. That we deserved more. And the moment we demanded to be human," he gestures vaguely at the city beyond his door, "they destroyed us." Quote. The man nods. "Maybe that's the real lesson. You can make people into weapons. You can erase their identities. You can give them new names and new gods and new purposes. You can control them completely, but only as long as they believe they have no other choice. The moment they remember they're human, the system fails." They sit in silence for a long time. Two old men who were stolen, as children, who served an empire for their entire adult lives. Who watched that empire turn on them and destroy them the moment they became inconvenient? Who survived by becoming ghosts? The man leaves eventually. Ibrahim never sees him again. Ibrahim lives another 4 months. He dies in his sleep in October 1826, 4 months after the massacre. No funeral, no memorial, no record of his death in any official document. He's buried in a pauper's grave with no marker, just another unnamed body in a city that buries thousands every year. The boy who was stolen in 1438, who forgot his mother's face, who served for 70 years, who collected hundreds of boys and turned them into weapons like himself, who stood in his own village and didn't recognize it, who carried a stone in his chest for 96 years. That boy finally stops carrying, and the world moves on without noticing. But Ibrahim's story is just one. There were others, thousands of others, boys who went through the same system. Some forgot completely, some remembered, some resisted, and a precious few escaped. In 1573, a Croatian boy named Bartholomew Djordjevic was collected in a Devshirme levy. He served for 7 years before managing to escape during a campaign near the Hungarian border. He fled to Rome, and there he wrote a book, a detailed account of the Devshirme system, how it worked, what it did to boys, the psychological techniques, the breaking, the transformation. His book, published in 1556, is called De Turcarum Moribus, Epitome Summary of Turkish Customs. It's one of the only first-hand accounts of Devshirme, written by someone who escaped. His testimony circulated across Europe, shocked Christian kingdoms, became evidence of Ottoman cruelty. But Djordjevic also wrote something else, something that troubled his European readers. He wrote that most boys who went through Devshirme became loyal Ottomans, that they served willingly, that they believed in what they'd become. He wrote that the system didn't work through force, but through education and opportunity and the systematic replacement of one identity with another. His European readers didn't want to hear that. They wanted a simple story of Christian boys forced at sword point to serve Muslim masters. They wanted villains and victims and clear moral lines. What Djordjevic gave them was complexity, the truth that systems of oppression can be comfortable, that stolen children can grow to love their captors, that erasure can feel like liberation if you control the narrative completely. His book was widely read, then largely forgotten. The testimony of one escaped boy couldn't compete with the official histories written by empires. There were others like him, boys who escaped and told their stories. But their accounts are fragmentary, scattered across European archives, letters to priests, testimonies to ambassadors, memoirs written decades after the fact, when memory has already been distorted by time and trauma, and the need to make sense of the senseless. What we know for certain is this. The Devshirme system collected between 200,000 and 500,000 boys over 350 years. The vast majority served loyally, forgot completely, became Ottoman weapons who defended the empire more fanatically than those born into it. And when they died as Muslims, as Turks, as men who had no memory of who they'd been before. A few resisted, maintained hidden connections, whispered prayers in forbidden languages, carried their birth identities like wounds, and died with stones in their chests, knowing they'd served the thing that destroyed them. And a precious few escaped, ran away during campaigns, defected during battles, fled to Christian territories, and tried to reclaim identities that had already been erased. Some succeeded, most didn't. Because you can escape a place, but you can't escape what that place made you. The Devshirme system ended in 1826 with the massacre of the janissaries, but its effects lasted generations. The descendants of Devshirme boys, illegitimate children, secret families, bloodlines that shouldn't exist, still live across the former Ottoman Empire. Most have no idea their ancestors were stolen Christian children. The erasure was that complete. In modern Turkey, the janissaries are remembered as an elite military force. Museums display their weapons, their uniforms, their military achievements. But the exhibits rarely mention Devshirme, rarely explain that this elite force was built on kidnapped children. The theft has been sanitized. The trauma has been forgotten. The official history is one of military glory, not systematic cultural genocide. In the Balkans, the memory survives differently. In Serbia, in Greece, in Albania, in Bulgaria, the stories persist. Grandmothers tell children about ancestors who were taken. Villages mark the locations where Ottoman collectors came. The grief has been passed down through generations, even though the specific details have blurred with time. And, somewhere in the archives, Ottoman, European, Venetian, Vatican, the records remain. Ledgers with names, collection quotas, reports from officials, letters from boys who escaped, testimonies from mothers who never stopped grieving. The evidence is there. The story is documented. What happened to Ibrahim and 200,000 boys like him isn't speculation. It's history. Recorded, proven, undeniable. But history is not what happened. History is what we remember, and what we choose to forget. The Ottoman Empire chose to forget the cost of Devshirme, to remember only the results, the military might, the administrative genius, the empire that lasted 600 years, to forget the crying mothers, the stolen boys, The systematic erasure of identity that made it all possible. The boys themselves, the ones who forgot completely, chose to forget because forgetting was survival. The boys who remembered carried their knowledge like poison. And the boys who escaped spent the rest of their lives trying to reconcile who they'd been with who they'd become. Ibrahim fell into the middle category, remembered just enough to suffer, not enough to escape, just enough to carry the stone for 96 years. Just enough to understand exactly what he'd become, and perpetuate it anyway. He was the system working perfectly, the weapon fully formed, the stolen child who grows to steal children, the victim who becomes the perpetrator who understands he's both simultaneously. And when he died in 1826, unnamed and unremembered, the empire moved on, built new military structures, created new systems of control, found new ways to turn children into weapons without calling it that. Because the lesson of Devshirme isn't that it was uniquely evil. The lesson is that it worked. For 350 years, it worked. And that's what makes it terrifying. Not the cruelty, but the efficiency. Not the theft, but how easily theft can be dressed as opportunity. Not the erasure, but how willingly people embrace their own erasure when given the right incentives. The Ottoman Empire is gone now, dissolved in 1922, its systems dismantled, its records scattered across archives in a dozen countries. The boys who were stolen are all dead. Their children are dead. Their grandchildren are dead. But the story remains, and the question it asks remains. If you take a child young enough, if you control every aspect of their environment, if you give them education and purpose and belonging, can you make them forget who they were? Can you make them love what destroyed them? Can you turn victims into weapons so perfectly that they defend the theft? The Ottoman Empire answered yes, 200,000 times. And Ibrahim, the boy from a Serbian village whose name is lost to history, proved them right for 70 years, until he died alone in a room no one remembers, carrying a stone no one else could see, mourning a mother whose name he never recalled. The light shines in the darkness, but sometimes the darkness is so complete, so carefully constructed, so comfortable in its horror, that the light is just a whisper, a ghost, a memory of something that might have been but never was. Ibrahim carried that whisper until it killed him, and then the darkness continued, as it always does. Section 8. The Reckoning. So, what do we do with this story? It's 2026 now, 200 years since the janissaries were massacred, nearly 600 years since the first Christian boys were collected and transformed into Ottoman weapons. Everyone involved is dead. The empire is gone. The system is dismantled. The trauma is buried under centuries of other traumas, other wars, other genocides, other systems of oppression that make Devshirme look almost quaint by comparison. And yet, here we are, talking about it, remembering it, trying to understand what it means. Because Devshirme isn't just a historical curiosity. It's not just an interesting footnote about Ottoman military innovation. It's a case study in something that still happens. That's always happened. That will probably always happen as long as empires exist and children are vulnerable. It's a story about what power does when it decides that people are resources, that identity is malleable, that the ends justify the means. And most dangerously, that erasure can be kindness if you dress it up properly. Let's be clear about what we're talking about. The Ottoman Empire didn't just steal children. Theft would have been simpler, more honest. They could have kidnapped boys, chained them, forced them into service at sword point. That's conquest. That's slavery. That's something humans have done to each other since the beginning of recorded history. But Devshirme was more sophisticated than that. It wasn't just theft. It was replacement. They didn't take a boy and force him to serve against his will. They took a boy and convinced him that his will was wrong, that his identity was a mistake, that his family, his language, his religion, his entire existence before collection was inferior, and that the empire, by stealing him, had actually saved him. That's not just cruelty, that's psychological engineering. That's understanding human psychology well enough to weaponize it. That's turning the victim into a willing participant in their own destruction. And it worked. God help us, it worked brilliantly. Modern psychology has terminology for this now. Stockholm Syndrome, when hostages develop positive feelings toward their captors. Trauma bonding, when shared trauma creates loyalty stronger than normal relationships. Identity reformation, when external control of environment can reshape fundamental sense of self. Learned helplessness, when victims stop resisting, because resistance has been systematically punished until compliance feels like choice. The Ottomans didn't have those terms. They just knew that if you catch someone young enough, isolate them completely enough, control every aspect of their environment intensely enough, you can rebuild them from scratch. You can make them forget. Make them believe. Make them defend the very system that destroyed them. And here's the uncomfortable truth that makes this story more than historical tragedy. They were partially right. The boys who went through Devshirme did receive extraordinary education. They did live better than they would have in their birth villages. They did achieve power and wealth most European nobles couldn't match. By purely material measures, the empire did give them opportunity. Does that justify the theft? No, absolutely not. Nothing justifies tearing an 8-year-old from his mother's arms. Nothing justifies systematic erasure of identity. Nothing justifies building an empire on the psychological destruction of children. But, and this is important, recognizing that it was wrong doesn't erase the complexity. Because if we reduce Devshirme to simple villainy, if we make the Ottomans into cartoon monsters and the boys into pure victims, we miss the lesson. We miss understanding how systems of oppression actually work, how they seduce, how they make people complicit in their own erasure, how they turn theft into opportunity and make it feel like salvation. That's what makes Devshirme so relevant today. Not because it's uniquely evil, history is full of evil, but because it's uniquely effective. Because it shows us the blueprint for how power operates when it's smart enough to understand human psychology. Look around. The mechanics are everywhere. Children, separated from families at borders, told they're being protected. Adoption systems that erase birth cultures and replace them with better ones. Educational programs that teach indigenous children their languages are inferior. Economic systems that force people to abandon their communities for opportunity in systems that will never truly accept them. Religious conversion that promises salvation but requires complete rejection of previous identity. None of these are exactly like Devshirme, but all of them use the same underlying logic. We're not destroying you, we're improving you. We're not stealing your identity, we're giving you a better one. You should be grateful. And if you're not, if you resist, if you try to hold on to who you were, that proves you need our intervention even more. That's the Devshirme formula. Dress theft as rescue. Frame erasure as opportunity. Make resistance look like stupidity. And most dangerously, give the victims just enough benefit that they start defending the system themselves. Ibrahim lived this. For 70 years, he carried the stone in his chest. He knew what had been stolen. He remembered just enough to understand what he'd become, but he served anyway. Collected boys anyway. Perpetuated the system anyway. Because what else could he do? Where else could he go? Who else could he be? He was trapped not by chains, but by the comfortable prison of identity erasure. The empire gave him education, wealth, purpose, brotherhood. In exchange, it took everything. And it convinced him the trade was fair. That's the real horror. Not that the empire was cruel, but that it was kind enough to make cruelty look like mercy, that it was sophisticated enough to make oppression feel like opportunity, that it understood human psychology well enough to turn victims into weapons who believed they were blessed. Now, the archaeological evidence, because this isn't just a story, it's documented history. Physical proof exists. In 2011, during restoration work at Topkapı Palace in Istanbul, archaeologists found something unexpected, a hidden chamber beneath the palace, a small room, sealed for centuries. When they broke through the false wall, they found scratches on the stone, marks made with fingernails, or broken pottery, crosses, dozens of them, small, crude, desperate. Beneath the crosses, etched in barely legible Latin, Lux in tenebrae lucet, the light shines in the darkness. This was their chapel, the Devshirme boys who served in the palace, working as servants by day, praying in secret at night, carving their faith into stone because they had nothing else, refusing to disappear completely, even when everything else had been taken. The archaeologists found other marks too. Names, not Turkish names, birth names, Serbian, Greek, Albanian names, scratched into corners where no one would see them. Boys trying to remember who they'd been before, trying to hold on to some fragment of identity in a system designed to erase everything. How long did they keep this vigil? The wear patterns on the stone suggest years, maybe decades. Boys gathering in secret, whispering prayers in languages they weren't supposed to remember, carving crosses they weren't supposed to believe in. And then, the marks stop. Halfway through one wall, the scratches become erratic. Then, nothing. Ottoman records from that period mention a cleansing of palace staff. Anyone deemed resistant was removed. No details, no names, just one line, disposed. The boys who carved those crosses, gone, but the crosses remain, 200 years after the system ended, 600 years after those boys were stolen. The evidence persists. And that's what brings us back to Ibrahim, to that Serbian boy whose name is lost, who stood in his own village and didn't recognize it, who collected boys from houses like the one he was taken from, who carried a stone in his chest for 96 years, who died alone and unnamed in a city that was trying to forget he ever existed. His story isn't unique. It's repeated 200,000 times across 3 centuries, but it's representative. It shows us the full arc, the theft, the breaking, the transformation, the service, the recognition, the suffering, the perpetuation, and finally, the erasure, even from the system that created him. Because that's the final irony. The Ottoman Empire didn't just erase the boys' original identities. Eventually, it erased them entirely. When the janissaries became inconvenient, when they demanded to be treated as humans rather than weapons, the empire massacred them. 6,000 in one night. The survivors hunted, the institution abolished. The word janissary banned from official documents. The weapon that had served so perfectly for centuries was destroyed the moment it achieved consciousness. The moment it remembered it was human. The moment it demanded more than what the system was willing to give. And Ibrahim, who'd survived everything else, collection, breaking, campaigns, massacres, the return to his village, 70 years of carrying the stone, couldn't survive that final erasure. He died 4 months after the massacre, not from violence, just from being finished. From carrying the weight so long that when the system finally released him, there was nothing left to hold him up. So, what's the lesson? Is it that empires are evil? We knew that already. Is it that power corrupts? That's not news. Is it that trauma perpetuates itself? That victims become perpetrators? That systems of oppression are self-sustaining? We've known these things for centuries. No, the lesson is more uncomfortable than that. The lesson is that erasure can be comfortable, that oppression can wear the mask of opportunity, that you can steal someone's identity and make them grateful for it. That systems don't maintain power through force alone, they maintain power by convincing people that there's no alternative. That resistance is stupidity, that forgetting is wisdom, that the theft was actually a gift. And that lesson matters because those systems still exist. They've evolved, gotten more sophisticated, but the underlying mechanics are the same. Take children young enough, control their environment completely enough, give them just enough benefit to make compliance rational, punish resistance subtly enough that it looks like natural consequences rather than systematic oppression, and most importantly, make them believe the erasure is their choice, their opportunity, their salvation. That's what the Ottoman Empire understood. That's what made Devshirme so effective. And that's what makes this story, this 600-year-old story about stolen Christian boys, still relevant today. Because Ibrahim's stone isn't unique to him. Every person who's been forced to erase part of themselves to survive carries some version of that stone. Every immigrant who had to abandon their language to succeed. Every adopted child who had to forget their birth culture. Every person who had to choose between their identity and their opportunity. Every victim who learned to defend their oppressor because resistance was too expensive. The stone is universal, the weight is human, and the system that creates it is still running. You've just spent 2 hours listening to this story. Why? What compelled you to stay? What kept you watching as we followed Ibrahim from Serbian village to Ottoman barracks to massacre to unmarked grave? Maybe it was the horror, the scale of the theft. 200,000 boys stolen, transformed, erased. That's worth remembering, just for the magnitude. Maybe it was the complexity, the way Devshirme doesn't fit neat categories, can't be reduced to simple villainy, forces us to sit with uncomfortable truths about how oppression actually works. Maybe it was recognition. Maybe you saw something familiar in Ibrahim's stone, in the way systems convince people to defend their own erasure, in the comfort that comes with forgetting, in the weight that comes with remembering. Or maybe, and I think this is the most important, maybe you stayed because stories like this need to be told, because the alternative to remembering is forgetting, and forgetting is what empires want. What systems of power rely on? What makes erasure permanent? The Ottoman Empire tried to erase these boys, succeeded with most of them, but not all. The crosses carved in that hidden chamber, the names scratched into stone, the testimonies from boys who escaped. That's resistance, not rebellion, not revolution, just refusal to be completely forgotten. And now? Now you know. You've heard Ibrahim's story. You've learned about Devshirme. You understand how it worked and why it matters. You carry a piece of this history that the empire tried to erase. That's not nothing. That's the opposite of erasure. That's memory as resistance, story as survival, attention as acknowledgement that these boys existed, that they suffered, that they mattered, that their erasure was wrong even when it was comfortable, that the theft was real even when it came with opportunity. Lux in tenebris lucet, the light shines in the darkness. Those Devshirme boys carved that into stone 600 years ago, in a language they weren't supposed to remember, a faith they weren't supposed to believe in. A hope that someone, someday, would find it, would read it, would remember. You just did. And in remembering, you've made their resistance complete. You've ensured that the erasure failed, that the darkness didn't win, that the light, however faint, however buried, survived. Subscribe to Crimson Historians, not for us, but for them, for Ibrahim, for the 200,000 boys whose names are lost, for the mothers who screamed, for the crosses carved in darkness, for the stone that we all carry when we're forced to choose between who we are and who we're allowed to be. Because some stories need to be told, even when they're uncomfortable, especially when they're uncomfortable. Because comfort is what lets erasure happen. And remembering painful, honest, unflinching remembering is how we prevent it from happening again. Or at least, how we make sure that when it does happen, someone notices, someone resists, someone carves crosses in the dark, someone remembers the names, someone tells the story. Someone like you, right now, carrying this forward, making sure Ibrahim's stone doesn't disappear when the story ends, making sure the light, however faint, continues to shine. The Ottoman Empire is gone, the janissaries are gone, the Devshirme system is gone, Ibrahim is gone, but the story remains. And as long as it remains, as long as people listen and remember and refuse to let it be forgotten, the boys haven't been completely erased. The theft hasn't been completely successful. The darkness hasn't completely won. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Not yet. Not ever. Not as long as we remember.